A soldier once said after returning from war, "The battle almost destroyed me, but without it, I would never have discovered the courage I carry today." That truth lives in every one of us. Struggle doesn't just visit the strong, it forges them. Scientists even reveal that the brain rewires itself under pressure, turning pain into power. And faith tells us the same. Where you feel most broken is often where God is preparing your greatest breakthrough. So the question is, will you let your struggle crush you, or will you let it carve you into strength? Struggles are the one thing that no human being escapes. From the youngest child to the wisest elder, everyone carries stories of moments that seemed unbearable, times that stretched their strength to breaking, nights when the weight of the world pressed against their chest. And yet buried inside those very moments is a mystery that changes everything. Struggle, though it feels like a thief, is actually a teacher. It feels like it robs us of joy, yet it secretly gives us treasures no comfort could ever deliver. There is a hidden gift in the weight you carry, and often that gift does not reveal itself until much later, when you look back and realize that the very pain that once made you cry also gave you the strength to rise. Scientists have long studied how the brain responds to pressure and difficulty, and their discoveries align with what poets, philosophers, and believers have always known. When life shakes us, the brain doesn't simply collapse. It adapts. It rewires. Under stress, new pathways are carved. Neuroplasticity means that challenge literally reshapes the mind, forcing it to grow stronger, sharper, more capable of facing tomorrow. This is why people who endure struggle often emerge not only wiser, but more creative, more resilient, more compassionate. What felt like destruction was, in truth, construction in disguise. But let's step outside the laboratory and into life itself. Think of a young student who fails a crucial exam. In that moment, everything feels like it has fallen apart. Dreams shatter, confidence disappears, and the voices of doubt grow louder. Yet that failure, painful as it is, often awakens something deeper. That same student may study with new discipline, discover inner grit, or find a new path that aligns more closely with their true calling. Years later, they may look back and say, "If I had not stumbled then, I would not have grown into who I am today." What once felt like loss revealed itself as a hidden gift. C.S. Lewis knew this truth well. He once said, "Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny." His words are not just poetic, they carry the weight of experience. He endured personal tragedy, loss, and deep loneliness, yet through that pain he wrote books that shaped the faith and imagination of millions. His struggles were not meaningless, they were the very soil from which his wisdom grew. And isn't that a reflection of life itself? The stories that inspire us most are never about people who lived in ease, but about those who faced impossible odds and found something extraordinary within themselves. Think of the seed buried in the soil. To the outside world, it looks like it has been crushed under the weight of the earth, trapped in darkness. But hidden inside that burial is the beginning of life. The pressure of the soil, the struggle of pushing upward, is what teaches the seed to grow roots strong enough to sustain it. Without the struggle, there would be no tree, no fruit, no shade to offer the world. Our struggles act in the same way. The darkness that feels like an ending is often the exact environment needed for a new beginning. From a spiritual perspective, many people of faith see struggles not as random chaos, but as purposeful design. God, in His wisdom, allows moments of discomfort not to punish, but to prepare. Gold must pass through fire before it shines. Coal must endure pressure before it becomes diamond. A soul must walk through struggle before it discovers its true strength. Is often in those hours of desperation, when everything else is stripped away, that people discover a power far greater than themselves. Prayer deepens, gratitude sharpens, and life takes on new meaning because suffering peeled away the shallow layers and revealed the depth of the human spirit. There's also a psychological gift hidden in struggle: empathy. Those who have walked through valleys of pain often carry a heart that can recognize suffering in others. Struggle softens arrogance and opens the door to compassion. A person who has known loneliness often becomes the one who notices the quiet sadness in someone else's eyes. A person who has fought through financial hardship often becomes the one who extends a hand to someone in need. Pain has a strange way of connecting us more deeply to the world and to each other. In a sense, it enlarges the soul. Yet while all of this sounds inspiring, let's be honest. In the middle of the struggle, none of it feels like a gift. It feels heavy. It feels unfair. It feels endless. That is part of the mystery. The gift of struggle often arrives wrapped in thorns. It is only after enduring the pain that we begin to see what it gave us. This is why patience and faith are so vital. The story is not finished just because today feels dark. The most powerful chapters of your life may still be waiting beyond the struggle you are facing. Think of a single mother working 2 jobs to feed her children. Her nights are sleepless, her body weary, her spirit often weighed down with questions. Yet as time passes, those very struggles are shaping her into someone her children will admire for the rest of their lives. They will look back and see a mother who refused to quit, who turned her struggles into a foundation of strength for them to stand on. The gift is not only for her, it is for everyone touched by her resilience. Struggles rarely bless only the one who endures them. They often ripple outward, inspiring, teaching, and lifting countless others. And then there is the undeniable truth that struggle reveals what we are made of. Comfort never tests us. Ease never stretches us. It is only when life presses hard against us that we discover muscles we didn't know we had, faith we didn't know we carried, courage we didn't know existed. Struggle strips away illusion and reveals reality. It tells us the truth about who we are and what we are capable of becoming. And often that truth is far greater than we imagined. There is a story told of a young man who dreamed of becoming a professional athlete. He trained hard, but a severe injury shattered his career hopes. For months, he sat in despair, angry at the world, angry at fate. But over time, he began to study the science of recovery. He went back to school, earned a degree in physical therapy, and started working with injured athletes. His own struggle gave him the insight and empathy to help others heal. He never became the athlete he dreamed of being, but he became something greater, someone who could give thousands of others the strength to rise again. His struggle did not destroy him, it redirected him. That redirection was the hidden gift. And perhaps this is the most profound truth about struggle. It is never wasted. Not one tear, not one sleepless night, not one heartbreak is meaningless. Every struggle plants something inside you that will one day grow into strength. The timing may differ. Some gifts reveal themselves quickly, others take years to unfold. But they are there. Sometimes the gift is resilience. Sometimes it is wisdom. Sometimes it is compassion. And sometimes it is the courage to take a step into a new chapter of life. When you begin to see struggle this way, fear loses its power. Instead of dreading hardship, you begin to recognize it as part of the path to your destiny. Instead of asking, "Why me?" you begin to ask, "What is this teaching me?" That simple shift in perspective changes everything. It turns victims into victors, pain into purpose, and struggle into strength. Pain is often the most unwanted guest in our lives. It knocks on the door without invitation, steps into our world without warning, and refuses to leave quietly. Yet the irony of pain is that while it feels like an intruder, it becomes one of the greatest teachers we will ever know. If comfort is a gentle lullaby, pain is a trumpet blast that wakes us from sleep. It interrupts the ordinary rhythm of life and demands that we grow. C.S. Lewis captured this truth when he wrote that pain is God's megaphone to rouse a sleeping world. Those words may sound harsh until you realize that the deepest lessons, the richest wisdom, and the strongest character rarely come from seasons of ease. They are born in the furnace of discomfort, shaped in the storms of loss, and carved into the soul by the sharp edge of pain. Think about how the human body works. When muscles are pushed beyond their comfort zone, when they are stretched and even torn through exercise, the body responds by rebuilding them stronger. Athletes learn that the ache of training is not a sign of failure, but a sign of progress. The very pain that makes them wince during practice is the language their body speaks to tell them growth is happening. Without the burn, without the struggle, there is no breakthrough. That principle extends far beyond the gym. Emotional and spiritual growth often follows the same pattern. The ache in your chest after heartbreak, the grief after loss, the frustration of failure, these are not random misfortunes. They are signals, messages written in the language of pain, calling you to grow in ways you could not have imagined before. Pain reveals truths that comfort keeps hidden. When everything is easy, we often walk through life half awake, unaware of our deeper potential. But when pain strikes, our priorities shift. We begin to ask questions we never asked before. We dig into parts of ourselves we never explored. People who have walked through sorrow often say they see the world differently. Colors are brighter, time feels more precious, relationships carry greater meaning. Pain strips away illusions and makes us confront what really matters. It does not flatter us. It tells us the raw, unvarnished truth. And though that truth can hurt, it also liberates. There's also something profoundly unifying about pain. No matter our background, our beliefs, or our status, everyone experiences it. It is the common thread of humanity. And because of that, it becomes a bridge that connects us to others. A person who has endured loss can sit with someone else in grief and understand without words. A person who has battled depression can recognize the quiet struggle in another's eyes. Pain deepens empathy, and empathy deepens humanity. Through pain, we learn to carry each other. Through pain, we learn that strength is not only about standing tall, but also about kneeling down to lift someone else. Psychologists have studied the phenomenon of post-traumatic growth, the idea that suffering does not merely break people, but can actually help them emerge with new strength, clarity, and purpose. Those who endure trauma often report greater appreciation for life, stronger relationships, and a deeper sense of meaning. It is as if pain becomes a refiner's fire, burning away the unnecessary and leaving behind something purer, wiser, more resilient. Science confirms what spiritual traditions have long taught. Pain, though brutal, can be transformative. Stories throughout history remind us of this. Think of Helen Keller, who lost both her sight and hearing at a young age. Her world was one of darkness and silence, filled with isolation most of us cannot fathom. Yet through that pain, she discovered strength of mind and spirit that allowed her to become a writer, speaker, and advocate for millions. Her pain became her teacher, her motivator, her bridge to greatness. Or think of the countless cancer survivors who speak not only of the agony of treatment, but also of the new perspective they gained. Many say they began to live more fully, to love more deeply, to waste less time on trivialities. Pain had stripped them of illusions and taught them how to truly live. There is something divine in this mystery. In Scripture and in faith traditions across the world, pain is never portrayed as meaningless. The wilderness always precedes the promised land. The cross always comes before the resurrection. Suffering becomes the soil in which endurance, character, and hope are planted. When you look closely, you realize that many of the greatest spiritual leaders and thinkers were not shaped by lives of ease, but by seasons of deep struggle. Their wisdom was born from wounds, and their strength was forged in fire. On a psychological level, pain forces adaptation. When the mind encounters distress, it seeks solutions, strategies, and resilience. Think of someone who loses their job. At first, the pain is overwhelming. Fear grips the heart, and uncertainty clouds the future. Yet that same pain often pushes people to rediscover their talents, learn new skills, or step into opportunities they never considered before. Many entrepreneurs, leaders, and innovators trace their success back to a painful setback that forced them to grow. Without the sting of loss, they might never have pursued their true calling. Yet there is also a personal dimension to pain that cannot be measured in studies or explained fully in theories. Each individual's struggle carries unique lessons. For one person, pain may teach patience. For another, it may cultivate courage. For someone else, it may reveal the importance of faith. That is the beauty of pain as a teacher. It tailors its lessons to the student. It speaks directly into the soul in a way no textbook or lecture ever could. Pain also teaches humility. When life is smooth, pride often grows unchecked. We begin to believe we are invincible, self-sufficient, in control of everything. Then pain arrives, and suddenly we are reminded of our fragility. Far from being cruel, this reminder can be a gift. It grounds us. It brings us back to reality. It teaches us to lean not only on our own strength, but also on others, and for many, on God. This humility, born of pain, is not weakness. It is the foundation of wisdom. Fear often surrounds pain. People dread it, avoid it, run from it. Yet fear of pain is often worse than pain itself. When we begin to see pain not as an enemy, but as a messenger, fear loses its grip. Pain whispers, there is something inside you waiting to be uncovered. It says, there is strength you do not yet know. It challenges us to rise. And when we do, we find that the very thing we feared became the doorway to freedom. There are countless testimonies of people who would not erase their pain, even if given the chance. They say, I would never want to relive that season, but I would not trade who I became because of it. That is the paradox of pain. It feels unbearable in the moment, yet when time passes, it becomes the very chapter that defines us. Pain teaches lessons that nothing else can. It teaches us about endurance, about love, about faith, about resilience. It shows us what we are capable of, and it shows us what truly matters. So when pain enters your life, instead of only asking, "Why is this happening to me?" begin to ask, "What is this teaching me?" That question transforms the experience. It shifts the focus from victimhood to growth. It invites you to listen to the language of pain, to hear what it is trying to reveal. And if you lean in long enough, you will discover that pain, though harsh, is never without purpose. Pain may break you open, but in that breaking, new life can enter. Pain may strip you bare, but in that stripping, truth and strength can be revealed. Pain may bend you low, but in that bending, you may learn how to rise higher than before. The language of pain is not easy to understand, but for those willing to listen, it speaks of growth, of transformation, of a strength that could never be born in comfort. There comes a moment in every life when the weight of struggle makes you feel fragile, when your reflection in the mirror whispers lies about who you are and what you can handle. Weakness appears larger than life in those moments, like a shadow that towers over you, convincing you that you are small. That shadow is deceptive. It is an illusion, a trick of the mind. What feels like weakness is often just the raw material of strength waiting to be shaped. Strength is not the absence of weakness, it is what rises through it. Think about how a muscle grows. At first glance, lifting weights looks like an act of destruction. Fibers tear, tissue breaks, soreness sets in. If you froze time in the middle of the process, you would only see weakness, fragile strands of muscle stretched beyond their limits. But in reality, those tears are the exact conditions for growth. The body rebuilds the broken fibers, making them thicker, stronger, and more resilient than before. What looked like weakness was the process of strength being born. The same thing happens in the soul. Struggles tear us open, doubts stretch us thin, pain leaves us sore, and yet beneath it all, the rebuilding begins. That is the hidden story weakness tells. It is not an ending, it is an unfolding. Psychologists speak about resilience as a trait that is not always innate, but cultivated. People are not born with unshakable spirits. They are shaped by experience, by trial, by the very things that once made them tremble. Weakness may feel like a permanent state, but is often the first step in resilience training. A child who falls when learning to walk looks weak in that moment, yet the falls are what give the child balance. A person who stutters in front of an audience looks fragile, yet those stumbles build the courage that later creates eloquence. Weakness disguises itself as failure when in reality, it is the beginning of transformation. History is full of examples of men and women who stood in the face of their own perceived weakness and found something powerful within. Abraham Lincoln lost multiple elections, battled depression, and carried self-doubt through much of his early life. Many around him would have labeled him as weak, unfit for leadership, a man too fragile for the storms of politics. Yet those very battles with despair and defeat became the ground where his wisdom and compassion took root. He led a divided nation not because he never felt weak, but because he learned how to rise through weakness. That illusion of fragility was the very soil of his greatness. Faith reminds us of the same truth. Scripture often speaks of weakness not as something to hide, but as the place where divine strength enters. When a person reaches the limit of their own power, something greater begins to flow through them. Weakness strips away pride, self-reliance, and illusion, leaving room for grace. What seems like the end of ability becomes the doorway to strength beyond human measure. Weakness does not disqualify, it prepares. The Apostle Paul once wrote that he would boast in his weaknesses because it was there that he discovered the strength of God. The paradox of life is that what we fear most, our fragility, can become the clearest evidence of how strong we truly are when we no longer lean only on ourselves. But the illusion of weakness is not only spiritual, it is deeply psychological. The mind is quick to exaggerate fragility. In moments of stress, the brain often whispers catastrophic thoughts. I can't handle this. I'm not strong enough. I will break. Yet studies on human endurance reveal that people consistently underestimate their capacity. Marathon runners often speak about hitting the wall at a certain mile, convinced they cannot go further. Yet when they push past that wall, they discover reserves of strength they never knew existed. Weakness was not the full truth. It was a perception, a barrier created by the mind. When broken, it revealed new dimensions of strength. Think of a single parent who feels like every day is a battle, every paycheck stretched thin, every responsibility too heavy to bear. In the quiet hours of exhaustion, weakness feels overwhelming. Yet those same parents raise children who grow up to say, "My mother was the strongest person I ever knew," or "My father taught me resilience." What appeared as weakness to the parent was seen as courage to the child. The illusion was broken by perspective. Sometimes we are the worst judges of our own strength. The same is true for people battling illness. A patient going through chemotherapy may look in the mirror and see only frailty, hair lost, energy drained, body weakened. Yet friends and family look at that same person and see a warrior. They see courage in every step, bravery in every treatment, strength in every breath. The person feels weak, but the truth is different. Weakness is not always weakness. It is often a mask worn by strength, waiting for the right light to be revealed. Breaking the illusion of weakness requires a shift in how we interpret our struggles. Instead of seeing weakness as proof of failure, we can see it as evidence of growth in progress. Instead of allowing weakness to shame us, we can let it humble us and remind us that strength is built, not given. The moments when we feel weakest are often the exact moments when strength is forming silently beneath the surface. Like seeds in the soil, unseen but alive, our strength is germinating during seasons when we feel buried. Pain itself plays a role in shattering the illusion. A person who has faced heartbreak once believes they cannot endure it again. Then life brings another loss, and they discover they can. Each time, the illusion grows thinner, the truth grows clearer. Weakness is not a cage. It is a veil, and when it is lifted, the view is breathtaking. Children often believe they are too small to make a difference. Teenagers believe they are too inexperienced to shape the future. Adults believe they are too flawed to succeed. Elders sometimes believe they are too old to contribute. All of these are illusions. Weakness is not about age or stage of life. It is about perception. History has seen teenagers lead revolutions, elders shape legacies, ordinary adults build extraordinary movements. Weakness bows in the presence of purpose. When someone finds meaning strong enough, the illusion shatters and strength rises like a tide. Science gives another layer to this truth. The human body is designed with remarkable thresholds. People have lifted cars off trapped loved ones in moments of crisis, strength far beyond what they thought possible. Adrenaline surges through the body, unlocking hidden reserves. In those moments, weakness evaporates, and the truth of human capacity shines. These are dramatic examples, but they reveal a principle that is present in everyday life. You are always stronger than your mind tells you. Weakness is often the first voice. Strength is the deeper one, waiting to be heard. Think of someone recovering from addiction. At first, weakness dominates. Cravings feel unshakable, relapse feels inevitable, shame whispers constantly. Yet day by day, strength grows. Each small victory chips away at the illusion. Each step forward becomes proof that weakness is not destiny. In time, that person often becomes a voice of hope to others battling the same demons. What once felt like permanent fragility becomes the foundation of strength that saves lives. The illusion breaks not only for them, but for everyone who witnesses their transformation. Breaking the illusion of weakness is not about denying the feeling of fragility. It is about redefining it. To feel weak does not mean you are weak. It means you are human, standing in the gap between what you have been and what you are becoming. Weakness is the hallway, not the destination. It is the night before dawn, the silence before the song, the pause before the breakthrough. And once you see it for what it is, the fear it carries loses its grip. When you look back on your life, the seasons you thought would break you are often the ones that built you. The days when you thought you could not go on were the very days that stretched you into resilience. The illusions fade with hindsight. What once looked like weakness becomes a story of courage you now tell with pride. Every scar you carry is not a mark of fragility, but a medal of survival. Every tear that once fell in weakness is evidence that you endured, that you are still here, that strength has always been part of your story. So when weakness whispers in your ear, when the shadow looms large, when you feel too small for the battle ahead, remember this: the shadow is only an illusion. Strength has always been living inside you. The struggle is not revealing how fragile you are. It is revealing how powerful you can be. Life often arrives at crossroads that are invisible to the eye, but undeniable to the heart. Those crossroads usually come dressed in struggle. A failure, a betrayal, a loss, a season of hardship. These are the moments when we find ourselves standing before two silent doors. One door says quit, the other says rise. Both doors are always there. The question is never whether we will face them, but which one we will open. Quitting seems like the easier choice because it promises relief. It whispers, just stop trying, and the pain will go away. The temptation of quitting lies in its illusion of comfort. You drop the weight, and for a brief moment, you feel lighter. But in reality, quitting often replaces the burden of struggle with the heavier burden of regret. A dream abandoned leaves an echo that follows you through life. You can distract yourself, bury it under excuses, or silence it with busyness, but deep down you will always wonder, what if I had risen instead of quitting? That question can linger for decades, quietly eroding peace. Rising, on the other hand, is costly. It asks you to stand again when you've already fallen, to hope again when disappointment has bruised your heart, to fight again when your energy feels drained. Rising requires courage not because it guarantees victory, but because it demands faith in the unknown. The scientist in a lab knows the principle of resilience well. Living systems that face stress and adapt become stronger. The body builds immunity through exposure to illness. The mind becomes sharper when stretched through challenge. Rising is not about ignoring struggle. It is about allowing struggle to build the muscles of the soul. Think about the stories that inspire the world. They are never stories of people who quit at the first sight of hardship. They are stories of those who rose again and again, even when logic said they should stop. Walt Disney was fired from his first job for lacking creativity, and his early businesses collapsed into bankruptcy. He could have quit, accepted the verdict, and faded into obscurity. Instead, he chose the other door. He rose, and out of that choice came one of the most imaginative legacies the world has ever seen. The theme parks, the characters, the stories that shape childhoods around the globe, they exist because one man refused to let failure define his final chapter. In the quiet corners of everyday life, countless unseen heroes make the same choice. The single father who wakes up at dawn to work multiple jobs rather than surrender to despair. The student who studies through the night after repeated failures instead of walking away from education. The patient who keeps fighting through pain, trusting that tomorrow may hold healing. These acts of rising rarely make headlines, yet they are the fabric of human resilience. Every time someone chooses to rise, the human story grows stronger. Psychology tells us that resilience is less about personality and more about decision. People who rise are not superhuman. They feel fear, doubt, and fatigue like anyone else. The difference is that they choose not to let those feelings be the final word. A resilient mind reframes struggle. Instead of saying, "This is proof I cannot go on," it says, "This is training for the strength I will need tomorrow." That simple shift in perspective changes the trajectory of a life. It doesn't erase the pain, but it transforms the meaning of the pain. Quitting and rising both demand energy, but the outcomes are worlds apart. Quitting drains the spirit. Rising fills it with fire. Quitting closes doors. Rising opens them. Quitting keeps you where you are. Rising carries you to places you never thought you could reach. Faith traditions across the globe echo this truth. They speak of perseverance as a divine principle, a sacred path. The promise is not that the path will be easy, but that endurance leads to transformation. God's presence is most deeply felt in the fire, not in the absence of it. Those who rise often discover that they are not rising alone. There is a story of a young man who dreamed of becoming a writer. Rejection letters piled high. Critics told him he had no future. Depression whispered that quitting would save him from further humiliation. Yet he kept writing. He chose to rise with every rejection. Today, his words inspire millions. If he had quit, his story would have ended in silence. Instead, it became a symphony. The choice between quitting and rising is never small. It changes not only personal destiny, but the destinies of those who are touched by your life. Fear often pushes us toward quitting. It convinces us that rising is too dangerous, too costly, too uncertain. Yet science shows that fear is often a signal of growth. The brain interprets stepping into new territory as risk, but risk is also the soil of transformation. The adrenaline that fear produces is the same adrenaline that fuels courage. Rising does not require the absence of fear. It requires the decision to move forward despite it. Children learn this naturally. Watch a child learning to walk. They fall countless times, but quitting never crosses their mind. They cry, they stumble, they wobble, yet they rise again and again until walking becomes second nature. Somewhere in adulthood, many of us lose that instinct. We allow fear of embarrassment, failure, or pain to convince us to quit. Yet the truth is the same as when we were children. Falling is part of learning. Struggle is part of growth. Rising is how we claim the life waiting beyond the fall. Think about the quiet victories of rising. The entrepreneur who fails 3 times before building a company that changes an industry. The artist who faces years of rejection before their work is finally celebrated. The recovering addict who chooses one more day of sobriety over and over again until years of freedom are built. None of these stories are easy. All of them are drenched in struggle. Yet all of them remind us that rising is worth it. Quitting tempts because it feels final. It promises an end to the struggle. But in truth, quitting never ends a struggle. It simply shifts it into a different form. You may avoid the pain of persistence, but you inherit the pain of regret. Rising, though hard, opens the possibility of redemption, growth, and fulfillment. It gives you a chance to rewrite the story. Faith calls people to rise because rising aligns with purpose. There's a divine rhythm in standing again after falling. The prophets, the saints, the heroes of faith, none lived without struggle. Their greatness was not in never falling, but in never staying down. Rising is not about perfection, it is about persistence. It is the stubborn belief that your life is bigger than your failure, that your calling is greater than your fear, that your destiny is stronger than your doubt. The beauty of rising is that it does not have to be dramatic. Sometimes it is as simple as taking the next step, breathing through another day, holding on to hope when despair screams loud. Rising can look quiet from the outside, but thunder inside the soul. Each time you choose it, you carve resilience deeper into your spirit. And over time, those small acts of rising become the foundation of an unshakable life. When you stand at the crossroads, remember that quitting will always feel tempting, but rising will always lead to freedom. Every person you admire, every story that moves you, every legacy that inspires, at its core, each one is a story of rising. Struggles are universal, but so is the power to rise. It is not reserved for the gifted or the lucky. It belongs to anyone who dares to choose it. So when you feel the weight pressing hard, when the choice stands before you, remember this: you hold the key to both doors. You can quit or you can rise. One choice will leave you haunted by what could have been. The other will lead you into strength, wisdom, and destiny. Do not let the shadow of struggle convince you that you are powerless. The power is yours, and it has always been. When life strikes with its heaviest blows, the first reaction of the human heart is often to ask why. Why did this happen to me? Why now? Why in this way? The question becomes a weight of its own, sometimes heavier than the pain itself. In those moments, faith becomes more than religion, more than ritual, more than a word we whisper on Sundays. It becomes oxygen for the soul. Faith reshapes the way we see the very struggles that would otherwise bury us. And perspective, that invisible lens through which we view our challenges, can transform what feels like a grave into the soil where new life grows. Science tells us that the brain reacts to hardship by flooding the body with stress hormones. Fear rises, despair creeps in, and the natural instinct is to retreat, to run, to collapse under the weight. Yet psychologists also discovered something profound. People who carry a sense of higher meaning, whether through faith, purpose, or trust in something greater than themselves, respond differently. Their bodies still break into sweat, their hearts still race, but their minds hold on to hope. That hope keeps them from shutting down. It keeps them moving. It keeps them alive inside even when everything outside feels broken. C.S. Lewis captured this truth when he said that pain insists upon being attended to, but is also God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. He knew loss, he knew grief, and he understood that faith gives pain a voice beyond suffering. Faith whispers that you are not abandoned in the dark, that even your wounds are not wasted. It is this perspective that allows a person to see beyond the surface of hardship and into the deeper work being done within. A storm is no longer just destruction, it is preparation. A loss is no longer just emptiness, it is shaping you to carry compassion you never had before. Think of the stories that move humanity the most. Rarely are they tales of ease. They are the stories of a cancer survivor who, after months of treatments, walks into a hospital room. Not to complain, but to comfort someone else. They are the stories of families who lost everything in a fire, yet discovered they had a deeper wealth in their unbroken love. They are the stories of ordinary men and women who fell to their knees, cried out, and stood up with a new strength that no degree or success could have given them. These are not people who escape pain, They are people who allowed faith to teach them through it. Psychologists call this post-traumatic growth. Instead of being shattered permanently by crisis, the human spirit has the capacity to rise stronger, wiser, more connected, more purposeful. Faith accelerates this growth because it gives a framework to hold the suffering. Without faith, pain feels random and cruel. With faith, pain becomes part of a larger story, one you cannot yet see in full, but one you trust is not without meaning. That shift of perspective changes everything. Take the example of Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who endured the horrors of concentration camps during World War II. He lost family, dignity, freedom, yet he observed that those who survived were often not the physically strongest, but the ones who held on to meaning. They believed their lives had purpose beyond the barbed wires. They believed their suffering could not erase their humanity. Frankl himself built a whole psychological approach around this truth. Man's search for meaning can carry him through almost anything. That is perspective shaped by faith in something higher than the visible. In American life, you see echoes of this same truth. Communities devastated by hurricanes gather in churches not simply to mourn, but to rebuild, singing hymns of hope amid rubble. Families grieving a loved one lost to addiction form organizations that save countless others, transforming their tragedy into a mission. Every day, in quiet corners, faith is turning pain into service, grief into strength, despair into determination. This is not denial of suffering. It is the reimagining of suffering through the lens of purpose. Spiritual traditions across the world align with this reality. Christianity teaches that trials refine like fire, producing endurance, character, and hope. Islam reminds believers that with every hardship comes ease, not by erasing the hardship, but by promising growth through it. Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism all carry threads of the same tapestry, that pain is not meaningless when it is seen through divine perspective. Science affirms what faith has whispered for centuries. The mind interprets experiences not only by what happens, but by the story it tells about them. Change the story, and you change the impact. Faith does not deny tears. It does not pretend scars are not real. What it does is give those tears value, those scars dignity. It says to the widow that her aching nights can become the very fuel to guide others through grief. It says to the addict in recovery that his battle is not just survival, but a beacon of light for those still trapped in shadows. It says to the young person who failed in school that failure is not a final judgment, but a beginning of resilience, the soil for creativity that no classroom could have taught. There is also a personal psychology here. When you believe your struggle has purpose, your brain engages in adaptive coping rather than destructive patterns. Instead of numbing pain with addictions, anger, or escape, you lean into practices that nurture strength: prayer, meditation, journaling, connecting with supportive people. These practices not only soothe, but also rewire neural pathways, making resilience a repeated habit rather than a rare miracle. Faith is not simply abstract belief, it is a neurobiological ally in the battle of the mind. Think of the heart that prays at midnight when no one else sees. The act itself is a conversation of surrender, a way of admitting that the burden is too heavy for one pair of shoulders. That act does something powerful inside. It lightens the weight because it shares it. Perspective is widened because the struggle is no longer a solitary confinement, but a shared journey with the divine. In this shift, loneliness transforms into companionship, despair bends into hope. There are countless examples across history of people who drew strength from this kind of faith-shaped perspective. Martin Luther King Jr., facing threats and imprisonment, spoke of his dream not with bitterness, but with conviction rooted in divine justice. Nelson Mandela spent decades behind bars, yet emerged not as a man filled with revenge, but with a vision of reconciliation that healed a nation. These were not superhumans immune to pain. They were men who allowed perspective to carry them beyond their wounds. Their faith gave them sight when the world only offered darkness. Every individual, whether a teenager struggling with anxiety or a grandparent navigating the loneliness of old age, can draw from the same well. Pain is inevitable, but the interpretation of pain is within our power. Faith and perspective rewrite the script. Instead of saying, "This broke me," you begin to say, "This built me." Instead of saying, "I am cursed," you begin to say, "I am being prepared." That shift does not erase the ache, but it transforms the meaning. And meaning is what gives endurance. The role of faith and perspective in turning pain into strength is like a sculptor working with stone. The blows of the hammer may feel violent, unfair, merciless. To the stone, it seems like destruction. But to the sculptor, every strike is purposeful, shaping, refining, preparing something beautiful. Faith teaches you to trust the sculptor even when you cannot see the final shape. Perspective allows you to stand under the hammer and believe that you are not being destroyed but revealed. Every person listening right now carries a story of pain, whether spoken or hidden. That pain might be fresh, like an open wound, or old, like a scar you learned to cover. Faith invites you to look again at that pain, not with denial, not with anger, but with courage to ask, what might this be preparing me for? Perspective invites you to stand taller, to believe that there is strength hidden in this season, even if you cannot yet see it. And when you begin to walk with that mindset, something extraordinary happens. You do not just survive your struggles, you transcend them. You start to speak with wisdom that others lean on. You start to carry peace that others notice. You start to live with courage that others admire. You become the very evidence that faith and perspective can turn pain into power. And your life, once marked by struggle, becomes a living testimony of strength. There comes a point in every life when the weight of struggles feels heavier than our strength, when nights seem longer than days, and when silence seems louder than hope. Yet inside those very battles is the seed of something greater than survival, something that reaches beyond the individual heart, is the possibility of leaving behind a legacy. A legacy is not about how much wealth you pass down, how many titles you achieve, or how perfectly your life appears on the outside. A legacy is born from what you choose to do with the pain you have endured, how you mold it into wisdom, and how you allow it to ignite courage in others who are silently fighting their own wars. Every scar tells a story, and every struggle carries the potential to become more than just a personal trial. Think of a grandparent who worked long shifts in factories, sacrificing comforts so their children could have a better life. That story becomes a family's backbone, a reason for gratitude, a reminder that strength doesn't always look glamorous, but it echoes across generations. When you transform your struggles into strength, you're not just healing yourself, you're building a bridge for those who will walk after you. Pain doesn't end with you when you let it breathe wisdom into the lives of others. It ripples outward like a stone dropped in water, touching lives you may never even see. There is something extraordinary about a person who has walked through fire and chooses to turn that fire into light instead of ashes. Think of the survivors who speak in schools, warning young people about the dangers they once faced, not to frighten them, but to empower them. Their struggles didn't vanish, but they used them to build a foundation for someone else's strength. Science even shows us that storytelling has a profound psychological effect. When someone shares how they overcame a hardship, the brain of the listener lights up in empathy and imagination, as if they are walking that path themselves. This means your story, born from struggle, can literally rewire someone's sense of possibility. Faith also tells us that nothing endured in this life is wasted. In Scripture, we find repeated promises that the trials of today are shaping something eternal, that tears are not forgotten, and that perseverance refines the soul like gold in fire. There's something divine in the way pain refines character. People often pray for an easier road, but what they are really given is stronger legs to walk the hard road. And those stronger legs are not just for you, they are for lifting others who are weary, for guiding those who are lost, and for being a living example that the valley is not the end of the story. When you shift your perspective from why me to what can I make of this, you step into a realm where pain no longer controls you. It becomes material for growth, like clay in the hands of an artist. A struggle transformed into strength is beautiful, but a struggle transformed into legacy is eternal. Picture someone who battled addiction and now dedicates their life to helping others break free. Their darkest season becomes a lantern for those still lost in the night. That's the power of legacy. It takes what tried to break you and turns it into a force that builds others. This truth is echoed in psychology through the concept of post-traumatic growth. While trauma can deeply wound, research has found that many individuals emerge with heightened strength, deeper relationships, and a stronger sense of meaning. This is not about glorifying suffering, but recognizing that the human spirit can bend without breaking, and in bending it learns flexibility that can sustain others. People who share their stories of resilience often spark something in others, creating a chain reaction of courage. The pain they once despised becomes the very instrument through which they impact lives. Think about history itself. The leaders we remember most are not those who lived in ease, but those who carried burdens with grace and transformed oppression into inspiration. Figures like Martin Luther King Jr., who bore the weight of injustice but used it to awaken a dream in the hearts of millions. Their legacy was not created despite their struggles, it was created through them. They teach us that the challenges you endure today may be the very material that makes your name worth remembering tomorrow. And even if your legacy isn't known worldwide, it matters deeply in the lives closest to you. For a child, a parent's resilience is often the very definition of strength. For a friend, your courage to get back up after failure might be the very encouragement they cling to in their darkest hour. There's also a quiet kind of legacy that doesn't make headlines but changes lives in silence. It's the person who forgives instead of retaliates, who chooses kindness after being shown cruelty, who keeps faith alive when the world feels faithless. That legacy is etched not in stone monuments, but in human hearts. And human hearts remember far longer than marble or gold. When you choose to let your struggles refine you instead of define you, you give others permission to believe that they can do the same. Struggles can feel like thieves, stealing time, joy, and dreams. Yet they can also be teachers if you allow them to be. Every time you rise after falling, you teach resilience. Every time you speak hope when silence would be easier, you teach courage. Every time you live with integrity in a world that rewards shortcuts, you teach character. The legacy you leave is not just in what you say, but in the life you live daily. Struggles are not just personal battles, they are opportunities to write stories that inspire, to turn pain into pathways for others to walk more freely. Fear often whispers that your struggles make you weak, that no one will understand, that your story is not worth telling. But fear is a liar. The truth is that your story is exactly what someone else needs to hear. People don't connect with perfection. They connect with honesty, with vulnerability, with scars that are worn as proof that healing is possible. A legacy born from struggle doesn't demand applause. It simply invites others to keep going. And often, that quiet invitation carries more power than 1,000 speeches. When you reach the later seasons of life, what will matter most is not the titles or possessions you gathered, but the lives you touched, the strength you offered, and the hope you sparked. Pain endured without transformation ends with you, but pain transformed into wisdom lives on in those who learn from your journey. Legacy is not something you leave behind after death. It is something you build in the way you live right now. It is in the words you choose, the faith you hold, the resilience you model. Your struggles are not just chapters of your own book, they are threads woven into the fabric of other people's lives. There will always be voices that tell you struggles make you less, that strength only belongs to those who never break. But real strength is not the absence of breaking. It is the decision to rise after being broken, to speak after being silenced, to keep loving after being wounded. When you live like this, you don't just carry your own story, you carry the hope of everyone watching you. That is legacy. So let your struggles shape you, but not in bitterness. Let them shape you into someone who chooses to shine despite the darkness, someone who believes that their scars are not signs of defeat, but proof of survival. Let your story remind others that life is not about avoiding storms, but learning to dance in the rain and teaching others the steps. The legacy of strength is not about perfection. It is about persistence, about love that endures, about hope that refuses to die. And when your time comes to leave this world, may people not just remember that you struggled, but that you transformed those struggles into something so powerful that it still speaks long after your voice is gone. That is the kind of strength that outlives pain. That is the kind of legacy that turns struggle into an eternal gift. When you step back and look at your life, every scar, every fall, every sleepless night wasn't wasted. They were shaping something inside you that comfort could never create. The weight you carried wasn't meant to bury you, it was meant to build you. Struggles don't come to announce your weakness, they come to awaken your hidden strength. Fear might whisper that you are not enough, but faith shouts louder that you were made for more. Strength isn't found in the absence of battles, it is born right in the middle of them. A diamond only shines because of the pressure it has endured, and you are no different. You are proof that storms don't last forever, but strong souls do. Life will not always give you easy paths, but it will always give you the chance to rise again. So stand tall, stand unshaken, stand as someone who has wrestled with pain and turned it into wisdom, as someone who has carried tears but also carried courage. Let your story be living evidence that nothing broken stays broken when touched by determination and faith. When the world looks at you, let them see not just a survivor, but a warrior who turns struggle into strength and strength into a legacy that will echo long after today.